Hey everybody, welcome to Dad's Den of Pop Culture. We have a comic book, sort of a comic book review, retrospective today. I got the idea a few months back to read the Avengers from the first issue and just keep going. Because as much as I was a fan of the Avengers in the mid 80s when I started collecting comic books, and Avengers and West Coast Avengers were two of the books that I got. And so I knew a little bit about their history. I thought, I haven't really ever read it just from beginning, to end, I guess you could say. And so I started reading, and then it hit me like it might also be interesting to look at what was happening in the Justice League of America in the same month that the Avengers was coming out. Compare, contrast. So this video is sort of a look at the first year of the Avengers, from September of 1963 to September of 1964. So maybe technically a little more than a year. They did not publish every month, so it comes down to 9 issues. And then over the same period, the Justice League, which did publish every month. And I think when you look at these things kind of side by side, you start to get an inkling of why maybe the Bronze Age of comics really should be called the Marvel Age of comics. There's some similarities when they both start, but Marvel, to me, starts pulling ahead in a lot of ways as these two comic books go. Now, obviously, this was not the first Marvel comic of technically the Silver Age of comics. We'd already had Fantastic Four, where there were quite a few. But I think in being able to look at it versus Justice League, these two team books, you maybe get this idea of what Marvel was really bringing to the table. So let's start off with Avengers number 1 versus Justice League number 22. Avengers, of course, brought to you by Stan Lee and Jack Kirby. Justice League brought to you by Gardner Fox and Mike Sekowsky. Oh boy, if I got that name wrong, I'm going to regret it. It's the little notes you don't write down that you suddenly realize you should have. But I think that's right. So let's take a look. So Avengers number 1 it's both an introduction to the team. Now, these were already established characters in Marvel continuity, coming together for the first time as a team. But it's also a big step in linking together what we think of as the Marvel universe. And in a way that DC didn't quite do, even though they had obviously their own established characters teamed up in the Justice League. It's also a Silver Age book, so it's also a bit of a fever dream. You get some really good action in it. There's a great fight, obviously, between Thor and Loki, and you see in that one lower panel, Thor leaping towards Loki and passing through him. You saw that in the Avengers movie. It's always nice when they take some elements from the comic books and actually use them in the films. You get a great fight between Iron Man and the Hulk. And that's an important aspect, because from the get-go, the Avengers are frankly a bunch of jerks. You could almost, if you compare the two series, you can almost do it as the super jerks versus the super friends. But that was clearly something that a lot of people enjoyed. But it starts really early, and the Hulk really doesn't become part of the team till towards the end of the book. Part of the story is that Loki is making it seem as though the Hulk is going on a rampage. This brings the Avengers together to stop the Hulk. That's specifically what they're there to do, before discovering that it's really Loki behind the whole thing. Henry Pym, definite jerk, to the Wasp, she struck me early on and throughout as really the most fun, engaging, charismatic character in the book, bar none. She's funny. She's kind of flirtatious. The rest of them are really arrogant pains in the butts in a lot of ways. It's kind of amazing that they ever come together as a team, but they do come together. They do end up defeating Loki in the end by knocking him into this lead-lined tank, which I guess blocks magic powers. I don't know if that's something that has continued, and this brings them together. But you can see through a lot of the dialogue from these characters that these are not characters who are friendly to one another. Take it easy, big fella. Don't do anything rash. Let's find out what he's up to. Stow it, Iron Man. We don't need a committee to handle one visitor. Let me take care of him. Real gentle-like. That's the Hulk when he was still not quite the rampaging, monster, puny humans leave Hulk alone. That'll become later, and so, Thor answers, do not injure him without cause, you savage, or I shall see that you regret it. Easy, Thor. No need to steam the Hulk up. There's no stopping him when he goes on the rampage. This is just how they talk to each other, and not just to the Hulk, although he does seem to get most of the abuse. But ultimately, the Avengers do come together at the end of the story and form the team. Although you can see, Thor and Iron Man are like, yeah, and Hulk is like, oh, yeah, we'll see how this is going to work out. And again, it's the Silver Age, so you get some bizarre stuff. It's a classic image that only Kirby could bring you. The Hulk dressed up as a clown, juggling an elephant. God, is that a seal? I think it's elephant, a seal, and a horse. And you're going, there's just no way you could do that to an elephant that wouldn't kill it. Oh, and they believe, the circus believes that he's a robot because the Hulk's dangerous and you'd be worried about that. But a green robot dressed up as a clown, let's put him on. So at the same time, the JLA is in part 2 of their first crossover with the Justice Society of America of Earth 2. I didn't realize how early that crossover started. Now, it makes sense, though. Gardner Fox is writing Justice League. Gardner Fox created the Justice Society. And, the barrier between Golden Age and Silver Age is somewhat amorphous, and it's not a very long time. Sometimes you get this impression that comic books stopped and then it took a big pause, and then superhero comics stopped, took a big pause, and then came up. It's not really the case. And in fact, you see Batman in this image. He's got just the black bat symbol. He doesn't have the other symbol yet. And in a later issue, beyond what we're going to look at today, they do the origin of Batman, and it is exactly down to the art, the origin of Golden Age Batman. Where does one end and one begin? With Batman, it's extremely vague. It's a bit vague with some of the others too. Wonder Woman doesn't have the skirt, but she has like the shorts. So her character design is still a little bit more Golden Age at this point too. And what you get, this is one thing you're going to find. This is a very early trope that you get of split the party. And what I mean is, and you got this on the Super Friends cartoon too. Oh, there's a problem. There are multiple supervillains doing something. And one's in Chicago and one's in Paris and one of them is in Beijing. Well, let's split up and deal with it, right? And then they split up and there's problems and they can end up coming together at the end. They use this over and over and over and over again in these books, to the point that it starts to become more than a little bit predictable. There does seem very much to be tropes in play the way Fox writes the Justice League. The art is pretty good. I like it. It's not quite as dynamic as Kirby, but it's pretty nice. And one thing I do like, I'll say, about the Justice League Justice Society crossovers, this is the kind of multiverse that I like. It's not infinite. It's not, oh, they drew Batman's ears shorter in this comic, so it must be from a different universe, Batman. There's kind of a point to it, to see the original heroes and this new version of the heroes, and one's younger and the other one's older, coming together, showing the differences because of the age of the characters, things like that, I think is kind of interesting. There's room for this sort of thing in comic books, but boy, can it be overdone and really cause some big problems. But I think the bigger problem, we're going to see it as we continue on, is where the Avengers seems like, and this is true of all the Marvel books, it feels like you're getting dropped into this, this world, this universe, this tapestry where everything's connected. And you're seeing it from different angles in the different books. But there's no doubt that all this stuff is happening interlocked together. Justice League feels more like it just happens in its own little world. And that's true with the DC in general. You did have crossover books, but everybody's in their own little city, and they're mostly make-believe cities. And it doesn't feel like it's all one big story that you're tapping into. So let's take a look at Avengers number 2 and Justice League number 23 and number 24. Avengers number 2 comes out in November of 1963. Lee and Kirby as well. Justice League of America 23 comes out in November of 63. Fox and Sekowsky. And they also bring you JLA 24 in December of 1963. We won't get the next Avengers book until January of 64. So we're going to be comparing 1 to 2 in this one. Well, sort of. We get an alien in this one. And specifically, we get this Phantom character, the Space Phantom. Can I just say, first of all, I love the look of this villain. It doesn't feel like typical Kirby. He sort of did something really interesting with this character, especially when you compare it, to the rest of the art. He has a very different feel, and he's an interesting character. It is very Silver Agey, but he can essentially replace a person. He can shift a person into like a limbo dimension while he takes their form and powers. And so that becomes kind of the key to this story is who's who? Is this Iron Man or is this the Space Phantom posing at Iron Man? We get this great imagery here. Kirby does fantastic work on these books. He really does. But there's fantastic imagery of Thor bringing down the rain and rusting Iron Man in place. Oil can. I love this little cutaway diagram of Giant Man's helmet, which, does that really help you at all? Not really. Oh, yeah, there's some circuitry in there. That's cool. The characters are still jerks to one another. Hank is still a big jerk to Wasp through much of it. But here's what I like. The jerkiness, and we're only in issue number 2, mind you. The jerkiness has an actual impact. And I like this line from Hulk. I never suspected how much each of you hates me deep down. I could tell by the way you fought me, by the remarks you made. Well, I don't need any of you. I'm still the Hulk. I'm still the strongest thing walking the earth. And whatever I do from now on, I do alone. Now, moving the Hulk somewhat out of the membership kind of makes sense in some ways too. But again, you feel like there are stakes to the story that you're reading. The things they're doing have an actual impact here. They're not just jerks to be jerks or let's shake things up for no reason. There's going to be some character growth here, and this is part of it. And I really dig that. Now, you get some bizarre stuff. One thing I noticed in terms of like pseudoscience, it feels like in the Avengers, pseudoscience is used for props, and in Justice League, pseudoscience is used for plots. You have these guys fighting letters. These aliens have made letters come alive and attack them. What the hell is that? That's just, it's odd. And I love Silver Age stuff. I can get behind it as a Silver Age book. But comparing it to the Avengers, you're kind of going, I could see why at some point some kids would go, I think I like the Avengers better. And this one, again, some great art, aliens. Now, so part of the Silver Age, Golden Age thing to me is really just a matter of, it was an update because now we're in the jet age, the space age. There's different lingo, there's different fashions, rather than a major change in the way they were telling stories. Marvel seemed to be telling stories in a different way. All new, all different. Here we get another plot from Aliens, this time the Queen Bee. And so the Justice League has to come together to put it. Now, here's where we talk about super friends. These are not people who hate each other. They might argue a little bit, but this is definitely, and this is actually something I like, but I also like the way the Avengers does it, if it's not taken too far. They're sort of professional in the Justice League. Like, these are adults who are happy to have powers that they can use to help people. And I kind of dig that. And I think in this day and age, it's actually quite refreshing. But super friends versus super jerks. In the other part, they're fighting an alien, Kanjar-O, who has some ray that he can use against them. We do get to, so, and they split the party in order to handle it, initially at least. There are duplicates, etc., which I guess is a little bit like what was happening with the Space Phantom. One interesting thing, and this is something that struck me, because just as I haven't really read these really old Justice Leagues before, I haven't read really old Green Lanterns or Flash before either. The Green Lantern power ring is a little different than I had imagined it to be, and maybe they changed it over time. In this one, he uses it to create atomic missiles, nukes, that he's throwing around like candy, which is a problem, and they have to deal with it. There's a couple other things that come up that I was like, oh, I didn't think he could do that. Also like this imagery of Antares 3. Danged if that doesn't look like original series Star Trek, and we're 3 years ahead of it here. That image, especially up in the corner, the woman's hair and the shirt with that black collar, it really made me. The first thing I thought of was, oh, they're doing a little Star Trek, and then I'm like, oh, wait a minute, no, they're not doing a little Star Trek. If they are, then they can see into the future. And so ultimately they defeat Kanjar-O. It just feels with a lot of these that there are no stakes. Because the Avengers, everything feels woven together, you feel like there are bigger stakes involved in the adventures that they're going on than you seem to get from the Justice League, where everybody sort of is in their own little bubble and has their adventure, and it's great, and they move on. And I think the pseudoscience and some of the goofiness of it doesn't help with that. I also think the way the Avengers do things tends to make people maybe want to buy other Marvel books. And I don't know that Justice League really made people desperate to buy the different books that these characters were in. They might be if they said, oh, Green Lantern looks really cool. Okay. But with Avengers, there are elements of going, wait a minute, what happened? With Iron Man, oh, I need to go check out the book that Iron Man is in. I guess he didn't have his own title yet. But anyhow, so let's go into our next one, which pits Avengers number 3 versus Justice League number 25. Again, same creative teams. I believe it's the same creative teams all the way through this. Couple things I really liked in this Avengers book. And this is starting to feel much more like Marvel as they kind of are coalescing, getting this all figured out. Now, here we do have some pseudoscience in the form of a prop, where Iron Man can beam his image pretty much anywhere he wants it to go to communicate with other people. And we see him here beaming into the Baxter building and surprising Ben Grimm. Now, that's kind of nonsensical in a way, and I don't know that he'll ever use it again. I think he does, actually, maybe in one issue. They probably dropped it at some point. But again, it's pseudoscience as a prop. The truth of the matter is, they could have handled it without him doing that. It makes maybe the story go a little faster, but the whole story does not hinge around it. And so he pops in, he's talking to Mr. Fantastic. I do love that one panel. As Sue's walking by, having been out shopping, it kind of looks like Iron Man is sort of looking around Reed Richards to check her out, which would kind of be a Tony Stark thing to do. He then beams in and he talks to Spider-Man. He ends up talking to the X-Men as well. I like it. It's bringing everybody in together. And we get that, the note about Iron Man and the Angel and Tales of Suspense, number 49. It feels like we are getting the Marvel Universe here. Everybody's interacting, which is what they were trying to do initially with the movies. And we get some great Kirby action, some great fight scenes, and very inventive fight scenes. And inventive without the need, again, for weird super science or, some kind of odd thing that the Justice League often kind of relies upon. Here we see, Giant Man throwing Namor, and then, here is some pseudoscience, though. The magnetic repulsor, which I guess is supposed to work against the iron in the blood, but I mean, it's all right, whatever. This one, though, also cool because you get this team up between Hulk and Namor, which kind of foreshadows the Defenders that's going to come along in a few years, where Hulk is like in this gray area between hero and villain. And Namor, maybe not quite as gray at this point, but it will change over time. But again, there's some character development. There's character changing. It's interesting. Namor is ultimately defeated. There's some awesome art, great battle scenes. I think at this point, Avengers is really starting to pick up steam. And here you get the flirtiness of the Wasp. I hope it won't be your finish, handsome, because I'm still waiting to see what you'd look like in an Ivy League suit and a crew cut with those shoulders. She is 20 times more charisma than the rest of the team put together. Absolutely no doubt about it. Wasp, for me, as much as Wasp was big in the 80s when I was collecting, she was leader of the Avengers at one point. Wasp really won me over in these early Avengers comics. She's fun. She's the most fun character by far. What do we get in Justice League 25? Aliens. A weird alien story that, frankly, I'll be honest with you, doesn't make a whole lot of sense. We get the team where they're combined, so Superman has the Flash's legs. I mean, this just doesn't compare to what you were getting at that moment from Lee and Kirby. And then we turn it up a little notch because Avengers number 4, Captain America lives again. Look at that. We get the Iron Man's armor, is changing over time too. We're getting that. Captain America comes back. You're never going to guess what happens in the Justice. Well, anyways. So I love this, the editor's note. We sincerely suggest you save this issue. We feel you will treasure it in time to come. Dude, that's the Stan Lee touch right there. No doubt about it. Save this issue. And by the way, if you did, it's probably worth quite a lot of money right now. So again, we get Captain America. We get his return. Some great art. He shows up, initially beats the crap out of the Avengers, which is a nice thing to show. Here's this guy. Now, he does have superpowers, but he's also this amazing fighter and all that. And in this cramped sub, he can really take them on and stuff like that. And it kind of shows the bona fides of this guy. This is a dude who can really handle himself. And so the story itself is a little bit weird. I wasn't in super love with it. There's some stuff in it it's maybe the overall plot is kind of weak, to be honest with you. But it's Cap coming in and we got another struggle with Submariner, and the Hulk is involved. Love this panel. No, officer, you're not mistaken. I am Captain America. Now think about it. This is 64, so we're talking about if he disappears at the end of World War II, which obviously there were some 50s comics with Captain America that they sort of explained was a different guy. If he disappears at the end of World War II, we're talking about 20 years that this guy's been gone. And I love, this is a police officer who tears up when he sees Captain America. And all these years, all of us, your fans, all your admirers, we thought you were dead, but you've come back just when the world has need of such a man, just like fate planned it this way. Forgive me, Cap, will you? I seem to have something in my eye. That's fantastic. And then we get Cap going up against these guys. Look at these fight scenes, pure Kirby magic. All right, so the Justice League, again, you're never going to guess, they're fighting another alien. This one is Despero. And notice Batman still has the old school bat logo on his chest. So this one, several of the Justice Leaguers have become really old. And Green Lantern tries to use his ring to reverse it. It can't. How does that work? It's a magic ring at this point, folks. It really is. So they head out to find clues, and it doesn't go well. They all end up getting trapped. And so Despero creates these alternate Earths, and he sends them to these alternate Earths. And you see Flash with an intelligent dinosaur, which, by the way, I love the hell out of that art. That is fantastic. Green Lantern and Batman end up on this world of intelligent insects. Martian Manhunter and Aquaman end up with the intelligent fish who help them out. And ultimately, they do manage to defeat Despero. But you notice Despero gets a hold of Green Lantern's ring, and he can use it. Although in this case, he has to use it against Yellow, which doesn't work. I didn't think anybody could just pick up Green Lantern's ring and make use of it. Apparently, you can. So, okay. Despero has essentially kind of won, but he decides to disguise himself as Superman and walk into the Justice League headquarters to see in person the old Justice League. And Wonder Woman kind of figures it out and puts the lasso on him. And he's defeated. Just like that. Now that's dumb enough. I mean, sorry, but it's dumb. But you also have a guy who creates alternate Earths. Why not just make your own Earth and rule it? Like, you're too powerful to bother with planet Earth. It doesn't make sense. At any rate, they catch him. Everybody's friends at the end. Wah, wah. Do you see what I mean? Like, the Avengers has a lot more emotion, seemingly bigger stakes, character growth. These guys just show up, do their mission, and kind of go home in a way. All right, we got another twofer here. Avengers number 5, May of 64 versus JLA number 27, also May of 64, and JLA number 28 from June of 64. Invasion of the Lava Men for the Avengers. We'll get to the Justice League. Had to put this full one on. Doesn't fit on the screen that well. But it is, to me, just a rad image. And kind of an interesting thing that happens here. No, that's in the next issue. Sorry, I'm getting ahead of myself. I do like the dialogue. That's Stan Lee. How ironic it is. I'm the envy of millions because of my wealth and my alleged good looks. There's hardly a man on earth who wouldn't want to be in my shoes, but how many would still feel that way if they knew that my life will last only as long as this chest of ice keeps my heart beating? I love it's great dialogue. It's fun. It's interesting. This one got me too. I brought you your lunch in a newspaper, Doctor. You've just got to take time out for your meals. Now, Jane, would you love me as much if I were fat and glutinous? That just killed me. If you ever spent time with my grandparents' generation, you know that they didn't have filters like people often do nowadays. So this one, there's this mysterious sound emanating from New Mexico. They go, of course, this is the realm of the Hulk. General Ross is there. Bruce Banner ends up being involved. This amazing art of this reveal of what's going on with these mole men, lava men. I'm sorry, not mole men. That's a whole different thing. With the lava men. I just love, that's Kirby. Just classic Kirby. They end up obviously fighting the lava men. There's some good stuff. Some, again, sort of pseudo-scientific tactics. Like, I don't think that would really work, but it's a comic book. It doesn't ruin it by any means. From the JLA that same month, they go after or face the ultra galactic being named I, which sounds very Kirby, to be honest. Although if you read enough old sci-fi, it sounds like that too. This is a weird one. This being is turning the JLA into has-beens, which actually sounds like what Kirby was doing at the time of the comic books. It's a convoluted plot. It has to do with a thing called the Robber Force, that every time they use their powers, every time they solve a case, it harms this being. And so he's got to stop them from being able to solve cases. In all honesty, it's nonsense. It really doesn't make that much sense. Maybe there was something, I don't know, that they were trying to do that just didn't translate. They end up with this plan of giving their powers to a Mazo, and then a Mazo uses them to do something to destroy I, and then they use their powers to destroy a Mazo. You do get this great image of everybody ganging up on a Mazo all at once, which I kind of enjoyed, but it's really just like, what in the hell are we talking about? And again, it's aliens. Aliens. The next one's not aliens, and it does have something that is of its time. In this one, their powers are being stolen with these cardinal batteries. Every time they use them, they lose the power or something. There's this great Silver Age scene of Wonder Woman. When a cruise ship passes by Paradise Island, she goes out and does like trick flying and stuff to entertain the passengers, which is just bizarre. And of course, in doing so, loses powers. And so because of what's going on, they end up being forbidden by the United Nations to use their powers. So these villains are taking advantage of this. And there's even this bit where they're protesting outside the United Nations, which again, very of its time. Earth unfair to organized superheroes. Lift the ban on Superman. Super rights. It's very goofy. They end up fighting the villains without their powers, and that solves the whole thing, and they catch the dude who made the batteries. And again, you're left at the end of it going, what the hell did I just read? I don't even know what's going on anymore. At this point, to me, the Avengers is by far becoming the better book. It just is. Now, in July of 64, no issue with the Justice League. We just get Avengers number 6. And this is kind of big for the Marvel Universe because we have this introduction, or I guess, I don't know. I don't know if Zemo existed in the Golden Age Cap or not, to be completely honest. But we see Baron Zemo, the hood stuck to his face. He now sees he's basically ruling over this Amazon tribe of Indians, and this is maybe kind of inspired by the Nazis fleeing to South America. So he's got his own little Nazi kingdom where he's ruling over these poor people. He finds out Captain America is back in action, and he's not going to put up with that. So he creates the Masters of Evil. We get the Black Knight spraying this glue everywhere, sticking everything down. Okay, again, pseudoscience in the props. In this case, it does affect the plot. So be it. We get the Melter, who looks like that. Where's that ray coming from in that bottom panel there? Oh, thank God, it's coming from his chest. So the Melter's doing his thing. Radioactive Man is doing his thing. I love that with him with the two guns. Great image. Ultimately, obviously, the Avengers come into it. They hook up with Paste Pot Pete, who will later be called the Trapper, who's doing time. He's serving time in prison. Again, we're seeing this sort of creation of this world where there are consequences to actions, even if they're somewhat limited. We get Cap back in action fighting against Baron Zemo. Some great stuff. And sends this cylinder with something else back with Zemo. It begins this rivalry with the Masters of Evil and Baron Zemo. Overall, good issue. The next month, August, we get Avengers number 7 and Justice League of America number 29. Number 29 is kind of important for the Justice League. I love the way this, though, and again, we're talking here about how we got this Marvel universe where things, go from one comic to another and consequences. Because of some stuff that was happening in Iron Man's book, he doesn't heed the call of the Avengers. And so he gets in trouble, which is how a lot of clubs worked back in the day. So he's suspended for a week, basically. Again, it shows consequences, which does help create stakes. The same thing basically happens to the Enchantress and the Executioner. Odin kicks him out of Asgard down to Midgard. We get some great stuff with them in sort of mid-century modern clothes. I love the images of the Enchantress there with that crystal ball. Just some, again, classic Kirby. They end up now hooking up with Baron Zemo. So this Masters of Evil storyline is not quite over yet. The Enchantress puts a spell on Thor. You get this great art of this nightmare he has of the evil Avengers who he must fight. Freaking awesome. Iron Man actually looks like a luchador there. And that causes him to attack the Avengers. Obviously, it gets worked out. And we get another battle between Captain America and Baron Zemo. And Baron Zemo loses. We also get this great scene of Rick Jones. So both teams have their teen sidekick. Snapper Carr with the Justice League, who is just nonstop hipster slang. And we get Rick Jones with the Avengers, who had initially started off with the Hulk, and now he's hanging out with the Avengers and Captain America. And he says, "Hey, I found this outfit for your ex-partner Bucky." And Cap is like, "Dude, take it off. I do not want to be reminded." So we got some genuine pathos. Love the image there of Cap, and that, with those eyes kind of just like, oh, he's not trying to be hard on the kid, but it's hit an emotional chord. You're not going to get that in the Justice League. You're not going to get that. Not really. Not at this point. Now, for the Justice League, we're back to the multiverse. And now we're going to see Earth 3 with the evil version of the Justice League, the Crime Syndicate of America. Good art. We see their Power Ring and Superwoman doing their crimes in their world. We get this little primer on how it's a world with reverse history. like Abraham Lincoln shoots John Wilkes Booth and Britain rebels from the United States, and you're going, this really doesn't make sense. There's a way to make this work, and this is not it. Just events happening in reverse is just sort of weird. It's like, I think that Native Americans land in Europe, Well, okay, well then wouldn't they have conquered Europe? And so it wouldn't be the Europe that later has Britain rebelling against. Okay, whatever. It leads to the evil Justice League. Ultraman, by the way, is ultra thick. They draw him really. They actually do that with Superman in these books too. Ultraman gains a new power from kryptonite. Everything's opposite, and sees into other dimensions. And they figure out, hey, we could travel to this other dimension, and we could steal things from there. Why do they want to travel to another dimension that has people that could defeat them in it? I don't know, but they do. They go over there. The Justice League gets involved, split the party. Everybody fights. The crime syndicate is defeated. But as each one of them is defeated, they say the magic word Volthoom, and this teleports them back to their Earth. And the idea here is that on your own Earth, you have the advantage. So this gets the Justice League to Earth 3, where they can be defeated and sort of trapped by the crime syndicate, who can then now go and rob from Earth 2. But the Justice Society, from Earth 1. But the Justice Society gets wind of this on Earth 2, sees what's going on. I do love that image of Dr. Fate because it looks very Golden Age. So they get involved, which is going to be continued in Justice League number 30. And we got Avengers number 8. This is September of 1964. I love the image of Wasp signing the autographs. Again, it just feels like this is a more cohesive world. There are things happening on Earth between all these different villains and heroes and innocent parties. And they don't just happen and then you never hear about it again. Justice League, alien comes down with a weird ray that does something that makes no sense. They split up. They come back together. They beat him. They all go, yay. And they move on with their lives. And we never necessarily hear about this stuff again. That was fine at one point. But we're entering the Marvel Age of Comics where it's not so fine. This one introduces Kang. Okay, well, DC has the multiverse. Marvel's playing with time travel. Kang's a cool character. I like him personally. I think he gets some cool stuff with he's fighting these, the U.S. Army. The Avengers show up. You see how powerful he is. He's basically like, I come from the future. You better surrender. That's the end of that. Amazing how much of this stuff, in more or less this order, with a few little differences, went off in the Avengers, Earth's Mightiest Heroes cartoon. I reviewed that a while back. I was watching those at the same time I was reading these, and I was always kind of amazed that those guys really did know their stuff. They did stick to a lot of this. A little bit out of order, some character changes, but you could tell these guys really know their stuff. Great Kirby stuff showing the future. Very reminiscent of what you'll get from his Fourth World stuff from DC. The man was just a machine of invention. He just really was. So there you go. There's our comparison of the two teams. And just to sum it up again, I think what you're seeing with this is the invention of a new way to tell these superhero stories. That's the Marvel Age of Comics. Forget gold and silver, bronze. I just don't, again, gold and silver to me is almost one age that just got a facelift in the 1950s and 60s. Very similar. Characters sort of exist in their own little world, but they can cross over with other characters. But there's not this cohesive DC universe at this point. There will be, because they see what Marvel is doing and how successful it is. So they will eventually get there, but they're not there yet. Marvel's doing something really different. It feels like there are stakes to the stories because there is this continuation. It's very episodic in DC and the Justice League. Each one's its own little thing. Marvel, it is one continuous story. They all kind of link together. That creates bigger stakes. The characters have a little bit more depth. They fight with each other a little bit, but we also do see the team coalescing. We get Captain America in there who makes it a little more stable. And I like all that. And eventually you're going to see that initial team. They go off, leave Cap, bring in some new Avengers. You get Hawkeye, Quicksilver, Scarlet Witch. A lot more arguing between the characters at that point, especially from Quicksilver and Hawkeye. Scarlet Witch sort of takes over from the Wasp of being more the voice of reason, like, boys, stop fighting. Let's go do what we got to do. But you do get much more character work here than you get with Justice League of America. And I would say, well, it's because all of those characters have their own books and they need to do most of the character work in those books. But if you've read those books, there's not a lot of character work in there either. It's sort of like, look, Barry Allen is Flash and he's a police scientist and he's got a thing with Iris and bad guys show up and he beats them. It's Lois and Clark. You know, it's the same story over and over and over again, which is fine. It worked. It was good for younger readers. And you know, sticking to that kind of stuff is not necessarily a bad thing. There is such a thing as too much change. I've been reviewing on Mondays Alpha Flight. A lot of people got annoyed at how much change there was in Alpha Flight over, you know, the first couple of years of the book, with characters being killed and this and that and the other. Not everybody was a real big fan of that, and I totally get that. That was sort of introducing a whole new age of comics in a lot of ways that were more for older readers. I think Avengers came in and managed to still produce stuff that younger readers could enjoy, but also stuff that teenagers and even into college kids could kind of get into. Kirby was fantastic with the art, so dynamic, so inventive about so much stuff. Stan Lee brought a much snappier pattern at that point, I think, than Gardner Fox, although frankly, not terribly different, the two of them. There's a lot of similarity. I would say Stan Lee's definitely more the huckster, though, with his editor's notes and things like that. But I think what you're seeing here is Marvel really coming onto the scene. And this is what's going to catapult it to become sort of the bigger of the two companies at a certain point. It might not have been there yet, but it was kind of heading in that direction. It was really fun to read through this first year of the Avengers and beyond. And comparing it to Justice League, I have to say, and you obviously from what I've said so far, I think at this point the Avengers was the better book. A little shaky to start. It really got its legs under it, though, and kept going. And Justice League just felt like kind of the same thing over and over and over and over and over. Not bad. Art's great. Well written. A little bit too pseudoscience-y on some of the plots so that they don't quite make as much sense as they could. Maybe a little bit too much focus on aliens all the time. That was kind of the hot thing, though. You know, just like Woody complaining about those space toys in Toy Story. But I think ultimately the Avengers really is showing what Marvel can do, and it's moving ahead of DC at this point in terms of storytelling and with those continuous stories of drawing people in. You got to get the next issue to see what happens, but you also got to get the comic with Hulk and got to get the comic that Ant-Man's got to get the Iron Man, got to get the Thor, because it's all flowing together and you don't want to miss one of those perspectives of the Marvel universe. So there you have it. What do you folks think? Avengers or Justice League? Who'd you like, especially if you were collecting back then? Who was your favorite? Were you one of those DC purists who was sick and tired of these Marvel zombies who just were simping for Marvel all day long? Were you part of the new loud generation of Marvel fans that was going to make everything different. We're going to shake up the whole. Let me know in the comments. I'd love to hear from you. Also, anybody out there in the comments, you know what this symbol is? What this stands for? Let me know in the comments. If you're the first person who tells me what this stands for, you win a no prize. My wife, do not do it. I know you know what it is. She got me the shirt. Well, no. Did she get it was a Father's Day present. Was this I think it was from daughter. No. Daughter got me the Art Bell shirt and the emergency fire helmet. Wife got me this shirt. If you know what it is, let me know in the comments. And you'll win a great big no prize. If you enjoyed this video, please think about liking, subscribing to the channel, and maybe sharing with a friend. Helps my little channel grow. We're getting, well, at the point of me making this video, getting close to 300 subscribers. Maybe by the time this one airs, we'll have gotten there. We'll see. But I'm getting close. We're growing. Little by little, we're growing. And I really appreciate everybody who gives the videos a chance. Even if you didn't like them, thank you for at least giving them a chance. I really appreciate that. So until the next video, though, God bless everybody. Please be kind to one another. Try to have some fun out there. Hopefully I'll see you again soon in Dad's Den of Pop Culture. Bye-bye.